Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor, the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app. We'll recommend Apple Podcasts. On Android, we recommend Spotify. Also, check out the Five Reasons YouTube channel for all your South Florida sports content. Messi and Company, 3 yards per carry, and more. You can find Six Rings Canes there. The good teams in town, the ones that are succeeding, the Panthers and the Canes. We got plenty of content about them. Maybe you can ignore some of the Dolphin stuff. Also, check out Off the Floor. That's our Discord server. That's $2.99 per month. Link right here in the description. You'll bypass the Apple upcharge. Again, Off the Floor is the place for the most heat information and conversation. Again, it's Off the Floor. Bypass the Apple upcharge. Sign up, pay, and cancel at any time. Also, PrizePicks. Use the code 5 FIVE. Play your $5. They'll give you $50 in lineups to play right away. Again, check it out. It's PrizePicks. Use the code FIVE. And now, today's episode.
Uh-oh. Yeah. It's Mercy. Music by Mercy again. Heat Nation. We the culture. Yo, E, I need you to call timeout. Need Brady to set the floor plan. Tropical blanket. Open for the shot. Yo, Greg, set the pick. Still 5 on the floor. Still ride for my dog. Still battle on the court. Still survive in the war. Keep your eye on the ball. Or get burned from the keep this mic off the wall without turning the cheek. From night to day, no sleepy pads or allowed to mornings. The nut is sleeping us. Never catch us snoring. Live from Miami. Report in the heat with 5 Reasons Sports from the courts to the streets. Yeah. Wake County, Heat Nation, we still proud.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on the 5 Reasons Sports. I got Brady Hawk. You can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. And Greg Sylvander, you can find him at Greg Sylvander. We continue to get you ready for training camp. Media Day coming up next Monday. We'll have interviews with several prominent Heat players, one-on-ones, in addition to all the group interviews. Brady, myself, Alex will be among those that are there for our network. So make sure that you check that out. You'll have FOMO, and then we're going to be at training camp in Boca starting on Tuesday. I don't know if you have FOMO about that, but we'll be up there as well covering that leading up to the Puerto Rico game against the Orlando Magic, who they actually opened the season against as well. But we've been just sort of following trends and talking about this roster as it's come together. The official signing of Precious Achiuwa was announced today. So he's now on the roster, although it's a non-guaranteed contract, at least for a period of time. They'll have to make a decision on this in a few months. But that gives the Miami Heat 7 of their own former first-round picks on the roster. So we go from the beginning. We've got Bam Adebayo from 2017, Tyler Hero from 2019, and then after that, Precious, Nikola Jovic, Jaime Jaquez Jr., Kel'el Ware, and Kasparis Hakachonis.
Yakachonis. You almost had it.
Almost had it. Anyway, I got Ware right. So,
but you got them all in order. Well done.
I did get them in
order.
Can
you believe we're here?
I didn't do that with the years. I can't believe we're here. I also can't believe we're close to training camp. We've almost progressed through this entire period of time. But it just kind of stunned me when I took a look and I'm like, wait a second. They got 7 of their own first-round picks on the roster. And I was like, how many times have they had close to that many in the Pat Riley era? Because before Pat Riley, all they were doing was stacking first-round picks. An expansion draft, Steve Smith, Glenn Rice, Ronnie Cycli, Kevin Edwards, those guys. So I don't count any of that. But I went back and looked through it, and since Pat Riley came to the Heat in 1995, they've never had more than 3 on the roster at the same time of their own. Now, of course, for years and years and years, they had Dwayne Wade. So you only needed to have 3 more to have more than 3 because you were always going to have Dwayne. And yet they didn't. They had Michael Beasley with him. At other times, they had Darrell Wright with him. But they never had more than 3 at any time until the drafting of Jaquez. The drafting of Jaquez pushed them over the 3. And since then they've added Ware. They've added Kasparis. And now they've added back Precious. So they're at 7. And I guess we're going to talk about, like, the relevance of this, because it's definitely significant. Like it's definitely a directional change for the franchise to be leaning on Adam Simon, his staff, and the players that they brought in. And because of these first round picks are all relatively recent, Bam is the oldest. Okay, and he's not 30 yet. It is one of the reasons they have a younger team at this moment. But I want to get into whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, because I don't know if we can really evaluate that, because I think it depends on what team you're on. But before I go to you guys, I just want to mention something here. Not that the Heat should ever be comparing themselves to the Charlotte Hornets, okay? And I apologize, Greg, for your proximity to them. But the Hornets cut their first round picks regularly. James Bouknight, 2021. PJ Washington's been traded. I don't even want to talk about the fact that their slot was actually used to take Shai Gilgeous-Alexander way back in 2018. Malik Monk, 2017, no longer with the team. LaMelo Ball is with the team. Mark Williams, of course, the whole situation with training him last year and then getting him back. They actually had the pick that took Jalen Duren, but they don't have him anymore. They didn't have him after draft night. And now they've cut Nick Smith, who was 27th overall in 2023. We're not talking about that long ago. We're talking about 2023. Nick Smith has been cut. Does that mean the Heat have done a better job? I guess the Heat have done a better job of this, right, Greg? Is that fair?
Well, compared to Charlotte, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think another relevant comparison is, or one to look at, the Indiana Pacers are a team that historically can never team build through free agency. It's not happening. Right. So they have to build through trades and the draft, and that's how they've always been. They have, I think, if I'm counting correctly, and I'm doing this quickly, so someone correct me if I'm wrong on Off the Floor or on social media, but I think they've got 7 guys that they drafted on their roster at this current moment. I mean, Siakam and Halliburton, they didn't draft, and obviously they're at the top of the roster, but they're typically a team where top to bottom, a lot of the guys are drafted. And so for the Heat to even be in that same conversation is, to your point earlier, and yeah, I'm using that phrase, my pet phrase, it's an organizational shift. And the thing that we're going to unpack now, and you alluded to it, and it's, I think we have to look at the floor as well as the ceiling of this group of players that you have together. And then we'll kind of get into, has it been a good stretch of picks? I have my thoughts, but I think that there's questions to be answered with all these guys. Every pick hasn't been a slam dunk. We can't say that yet.
Well, I think that's fair, and I think the one that is going to bring that to mind most for the fans is the one that they just brought back, right? Because I think if you look at the way that they've drafted over this period of time, they haven't done the conventional thing every year. I mean, you look at their picks, they've picked the player, Brady, that they think fits them the best. Even if you go all the way back to Bam, on the night that Bam was drafted, and they probably would have taken Donovan Mitchell. Okay, that was discussed at the time. But on the night that Bam was drafted, there was a lot of conversation about his limitations. He was compared to Clint Capella, which is a good NBA player, but not the NBA player that Bam has become. Although I guess I remember Riley comparing it to Sean Kemp on draft night also. And then there was the physical resemblance to Dwight Howard, which I remember asking Dwight about. And he's like, yeah, he looks exactly like me. But doesn't play exactly like him. They play a lot different. But Bam has exceeded expectations. We talk about it. I don't know. A lot of those teams would like to have their picks back that picked ahead of the Heat, but Bam might not have blossomed for some of those teams. And that's one of the things I want to make clear here is it's not just about who you pick. It's also environment. It's whether or not you're able to develop the player and whether he fits your system. Hero in 19 was an unpopular pick with the majority of Heat fans that night. He didn't really come on until the second half of his freshman year. He had short arms. There was a lot of conversation about that. There's the obvious limitations that come with being an American-born white guard. Okay. Was he going to be able to play at this level? There were comparisons to a lot of players that did not pan out in the NBA. And obviously he's exceeded his draft position by a considerable amount. But then you go forward and you look at, Jovic and Hawkins were completely opposite picks from each other in terms of one being supposedly ready to play and the other needing development. Where was a flyer on talent, question about motor, different archetype than the Heat have typically drafted. And now taking Kasparis, which they haven't had a point guard prospect in forever. So, Brady, is there any rhyme or reason in your view to, and then of course Precious, which, didn't work out in the sense that two really good guards were drafted after him, in Bane and Maxey. But is there any sort of rhyme or reason in your view to why things have worked or why they haven't worked with the team, and what it means that all these picks are still on the roster?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. I think number one, there's a part of this that I think we're forgetting to mention is that teams are scared to take Miami's players like out of their system because we've seen what they become. Like we've seen what the undrafted players have become when they hit other teams and they kind of plummet. I think there is a case of that here when you're talking about trades. When let's even say when you're dangling a guy like Jaime who had his high moments in his rookie season. Let's not even talk about the sophomore season. I think teams were even looking at highly talented players and are like, well, is he going to do the same thing here? Is it a fit thing? Is it just them just getting the most out of their players? They're not taking the swings on them. So it kind of leaves them in a position where they end up just staying with the roster because it isn't worth moving them. When just evaluating how they've kind of dealt with the draft process, I mean, we were talking a lot about Maxey on that one draft night and Bane as well, and they went with Precious, obviously. But I'm going to be honest, as much as we look at some things negatively with the way that they've treated things, we can't nitpick the way that the draft department has and the scouting department has dealt with this because, like, yeah, they're not shooting 100% from the field, but they're shooting pretty close. I mean, they have nailed a lot of these picks. Like talking about the two pillars of your franchise right now, that was at the end of the lottery in Bam and Tyler. Looking at the guys, you mentioned a guy like Jovic, who's at the end of the first round, that you find a gem that they're looking at this season as somebody that could kind of jump the upside of this team. A lot of teams don't get that at the end of the first round. Jaquez was somebody that we didn't know if they were going to take a guy like that. He ends up being on, in the rookie of the year status. It's the same thing with Khalil Ware. Picked in the same, at a certain part. There's questions about, his motor and everything. He ends up being in the rookie of the year status. So that part alone, I would say it's a positive thing because the draft, the scouting department does so well. The flip side of it, I think the only negative part about it is having your last 7 first-round picks is that when I heard Precious was back at this roster, I'm like, okay, this is good because they have somebody that knows their system. But the flip side of it is I'm kind of somebody with the Heat right now that I think they need somebody that doesn't know their system. Like they need new blood. They need some new fillers, and that's what they did with Powell. That's what they've done with a lot of these guys, and I think that's what's necessary and what a lot of people like about kind of the changes on the roster is you just need something different a lot of times. And I think when we've seen things get stale and maybe they go an extra year or two with keeping a guy and before he ends up getting moved, like let's say Duncan, for example, like he was getting moved the last 7 off seasons, I feel like, and then finally this is the one where he ends up going. Things do end up getting stale, so it feels like if you're holding on for an extra period of time, it just kind of releases the creativity that Spo has on the roster. So that's just like nitpicking the zooming in on this topic. But like I think the overall thing is you cannot complain about a team being able to retain their last 7 first-round picks and them being rotation players, right? Like, I mean, we're talking about all of them being rotation players except for Kasparis, and we'll see what he ends up becoming in the future. But I just think it just shows where they are as a scouting department. Also, like you said, the funniest thing is they've not been in the same spot picking, but also they have not picked the same type of player. Like it's been the high upside guy, the high floor guy. Like they have legitimately picked the guy that's on the top of their board and not on the top of the main board, which is why this year was funny because this was the first time we've seen them actually go with like the guy that dropped. Like they've avoided that guy year after year, and they finally did that. So we'll see how that pans out. But I think overall, I just can't be somebody that's nitpicking, the one miss at 7 or something like that.
Well, I think the other thing about this, Greg, though, is that people are going to point to this and say, well, look, if they're so good at this, at finding players that they want to keep on their roster, at least enough to extend them offers. And, now they may extend Jovic beyond his rookie scale. And hopefully you do ultimately with Ware. We'll see what happens with Jaquez. If you're so good at this, how good would you be if you actually tanked one year and you were picking better than 13th, which is the best they've picked during this entire run? They don't. That you go back to, they've had picks higher than that in the past. Of course, Beasley was 2nd, Wade was 5th, Karan was 10th, Justice was 10th. Obviously they hit on a franchise icon with one of them. They hit on a pretty good player with another one in Karan. They had a couple of disappointments, in Beasley and Winslow, relative to their draft slots otherwise. But like that is what fans are going to say. They're going to say, well, okay, you're leaning into keeping first round picks, and that's better then a bunch of undrafteds. That is an organizational shift because it's not just these guys. Look, Davion was a first-round pick, not theirs, so that's an 8th. Wiggins was a first-round pick. He was the number 1 overall pick, so that's 9 first-round picks on this roster, of which 7 are Miami's. Powell was a second-round pick. Larson was a second-round pick. So they're leaning on drafted players now. That's not something they've done in recent years. And I like that higher upside, but then fans will say, well, then get to even higher upside. Tank a year. Tank this
Wouldn't
year.
Rozier be another draft first-round pick?
Rozier was a first-round pick. Oh, God, I forgot. Yeah, that's right. That's so the 10.
Yeah,
10
you got to give them credit for every single one of them. But
that's right.
It's for me, I think that like fans are going to look at this team, and because it doesn't have a really high ceiling, you're going to ask yourself, like, how many of these guys are you really going to invest in long term? And you got to learn more about what some of these guys look like. But they have enough equity in what Bam and Tyler have become to at least say that they are good at this process. But when you talk about tanking a year, I think the Heat genuinely believe, and I don't blame them for thinking this way, that they don't need to tank a year to get in position to draft a player. Like, let's just use ESPN's brilliant rankings that just came out that had Bam Adebayo 21st in the league. If you can get the 21st best player in the league in the late lottery, why tank? So I think that like there's nuance to this. And I think it's more about maybe if you accumulated more first round picks and had more shots at that. Now I sound like Hanky all of a sudden. Like if you had more shots at first round picks, would you hit on more players and have more rotation guys? For me, I think the big surprise out of all this also is that Riley hasn't packaged all these guys up for somebody along the way here. Like, that's pretty surprising because typically that's what we would have expected to happen.
Well, that's the other thing that fans are going to say. You've hit on both things. I think that we'll look at this as a positive, I think, or at least I do, because I'm like, okay, these players, at least to some degree, and Tyler and Bam, obviously the biggest success stories thus far, but these players are good enough that they deserve roster spots and possible rotation spots on at least what is an average team. Okay, like we can't say the Heat are better than that until they prove that this year.
For sure.
Okay, so that's the one. But the negative things, the negative fans are going to say on one end, well, this is why you need to tank so that you get higher picks and you can maximize. And then the other fans are going to say, well, this is why Pat should be packaging some of these players. The old Pat would have done that. And he would have said, if Phoenix wanted everything for Durant, he would have given them everything for Durant, because that was the way that they used to operate. So I understand kind of the devil's advocate positions that are taken here, but I also don't think you want to be Charlotte. And by the way, it's not just Charlotte. There's a lot of teams in the league.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about trying to take a lot of shots. Detroit and Orlando, and to a certain degree, Houston, okay, are all teams that kind of decided to rebuild at the same time, right? And now all 3 of them have come out of it, right? It took Detroit longer, but now Houston, even with the Van Vliet injury, is projected to be top 4 in the West. They were number 2 last year. Detroit and Orlando are projected to be top 5 in the East, I think, by most. Orlando, a lot of people have them projected top 3. All 3 of those teams took a lot of shots. They took a lot of shots in the draft, okay? And then they also got high picks in the draft. Look, Reed Shepherd's going to step in at point guard now. Or guard for Van Vliet. He was a top 5 pick. You look at Cade, number 1 overall pick. Paolo, number 1 overall pick. Franz was a top 10, top 15 pick. But they missed on guys too. Orlando just traded Cole Anthony. Like, there's been guys that they haven't hit on, and I don't know what Anthony Black's going to be. But they've taken all these shots at it and they've gotten to a certain point. And that's where I think Heat fans are like, all right, well, someday you need to do that, but they're not going to do that. They're not going to try to grab 2 or 3 picks in the draft. They're not going to try to get up to this level of the draft. They're going to keep, if they have their first round pick, wherever the hell it falls, they're going to try to draft the best player that they can for them. All right. I want to get to the other side of this, and we're just going to talk about these 7 guys real quick. Rapid fire as we go. But it's an interesting debate because it's one of those stats that comes out that is definitely a change for the Heat. But I guess we won't know if it's a good or a bad thing until we see if they can actually put a contender together this way. All right, before we do mention anything else, we know what's not a good thing: car accident. right? A car accident is never a good thing, but it's better if you reach out to our friends over at 305-800-PAIN 24/7. They are there for you. Whatever language you speak, they will direct you to the right person. Based in Doral, but they handle the entire South Florida market. And again, they'll get you to the right legal advice right away. So check them out. It's 305-800-PAIN. We mentioned that they're in Doral. It's easy. The name of the company is the actual phone number. But we're going to be out there recording more episodes from Doral, as Alex and I did a couple of weeks ago. So check out them on all of our content. Manny, Danny, great people down there as well. Car accident, slip and fall, 305-800-PAIN. So, okay, they've gotten 2 All-Stars out of this, right? One of which won't start the season on time. One of which has been maxed. The other one wants a max. Jovic is somebody who's up for an extension. Jaquez was first team All-Rookie. Ware was second team All-Rookie. Casper has showed some good and some not so ready in the summer league. And Precious, I think, is the one that we know what he is now, right? Would you say that this is as far as a ceiling, Precious has the lowest ceiling of these 7? I mean, it's already been proven, the fact that he was available at this point. Is that fair, Brady?
Yeah, for sure. I think we definitely know what he is. That's why there's no getting too high or too low on this pickup. Like, that's why it wasn't too polarizing for me on the basketball court. It's just you add some depth to the big man position. You put somebody that Bam or Ware doesn't have to be staggered 24/7. Like, there can be a moment in a basketball game for the Miami Heat this year where Bam and Ware are sitting on the bench at the same time. That wasn't possible 48 hours ago. So, but with that said, I think we 100% we know what he is. He's just somebody that can move his feet a little bit on defense. He's not going to be a high-level scorer. You're not going to rely on him to be a high-level spacer or a high-level scorer, but he's just somebody that, to me, is just a younger version of a lot of the veteran bigs they picked up on the minimum over the last few years. And you just get somebody with maybe just a little, like, I don't want to say higher upside, but just a little higher upside than those veteran bigs. But to your point, he has the lowest upside among the group. And I would say after that, it's probably what, Jaime? I mean, is that who you go to next at 2? Like, it comes down to like Casper's just being a rookie, he's automatically going to have higher upside because we haven't seen what's next for him. So if you go down the line, I'd say he's naturally probably number 2.
Greg, if there's another question, what is the best case scenario for the Heat? Take Bam and Tyler out of the equation. They're established players. Precious we're taking out of the equation now because we know kind of what he is. The other four, and we're not including Larson in this because he's a second-round pick, but Ware, Jovic, Jaquez, Kasparis. Tell me, if one of those guys becomes a star, what is the best case scenario for the organization? In other words, if I was to say,
like which one of those guys?
Yes, not which one you think will become a star, but what is best for the organization? If only one of them becomes a star, which is the one that you would say this is the best one for the Heat?
It probably would be Ware, just because it would change. If he gets to that level, then that means he and Bam are on the court all the time, basically together. And I think that there is just a lot of flexibility with that. And it would mean that they would figure out things defensively where you could probably cover up for some of the other guys. So there's just, I don't know, there's a lot of upside with that duo in the front court that I think is worth exploring. There could be cases made for other guys. And Yakachonis is really special because, like, he, if he were to blossom into his best self, he could transcend some of like just the way that he can run a team is really fun. But the turnovers is what's going to make or break him, I think. And that's just we're going to have to see how that works. So for me, it's Ware. Do either of you feel strongly that it's Nico instead? I think those are the only 2 guys that we're debating about here, right?
I think it depends on what kind of era we're in, and I could make an argument for Nico. If he became a star, the versatility that comes with that, I could make that argument, but I think there's an argument to be made for Kasparis too. If you have a lead guard in this era, a guy with the ball's going to be in his hands all the time, who is a legitimate playmaker as a scorer, as a passer, and all of that, that's a game changer, isn't it, Brady? Can you make any case for him?
100%. I was going to say Jovic probably has the best chance like among the four. But I think if you're maxing out best possibility for each of these guys, Ware is probably at the top, but Kaspers is the only guy you can make a case for, because if you're telling me that he is a star level point guard in this league, like if he's you're talking about, let's say, I'm thinking about like passing elite point guards. If you have an Halliburton type player in your backcourt next to the guys you already have, I mean, that definitely changes things most. Ware definitely does too, but him becoming a star, it doesn't. I mean, I guess it's Wemby light. Like, is that what you're projecting Ware to be at that point? Like, if you're maxing him out, but I honestly think it could be Kaspers, because if you can lock up your backcourt and you're saying he's a star level player, Tyler Hero is still in the backcourt, and you're just figuring out the other stuff that they've had success finding, like filling out the other sides of the roster. Yeah, that would be pretty ideal, but definitely feels like we're some couple years away, at least 2 years away from seeing him consistently, at least in the rotation. Maybe I'm wrong.
In concept, so just in concept, Brady's 100% right, and I take it back. Yakachonis is the guy that would be most transcendent to all of this if he were to actually become a star. It's just hard for me to actually go there for too long and
before he even gets a minute in the NBA.
Yeah, like, it just seems premature to think that way, but truthfully, for what he brings to the table, it would be the most game-changing. Ware would still need to get set up no matter what, even if he's a star. So I do take that back, but I just think that that's something that is so far in the future that it's hard to put it in the same conversation as Nico and Ware, who I feel like are a little bit closer to that moment where they could pop.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I just think that in the modern NBA, look at the four teams that made the conference finals last year.
No, it's true.
They all had guards who could do pretty much everything, whether it was on or off the ball. And I'm not saying Kaspers is going to be that. There's no way to project that, particularly after this summer league. We are way away from that. I'm not saying his last name again. Maybe that's why I don't want to project it. But I don't think that a big in today's game can impact as much as a guard. And again, Nico's in between. So I'm going to say Kaspers. But it's an interesting debate. I think it's pretty fair to say that of the four, Jaquez would have Jaquez popping into a star, which I don't think feels likely right now, but also I don't think that would have the most impact.
The only case you could make is like when he came onto the scene, he was called they were calling him Jimmy Butler. Like they were calling him Jimmy Butler Jr. So like if Jaime Jaquez's best self is filling the gap that Jimmy left, I mean, that's pretty ideal. I mean, that you could make a case, honestly, that he even might be higher than Jovic, like in that specific case. And it's funny that I'm bumping down Jovic because I really do believe he has the highest potential to be that. And I think it's the most realistic. But I think, like, in theory, when you're, like, maxing them all out at best case scenario, and maybe I'm not giving Jovic enough credit. I'm not letting him become Luka in my head. But Jaime's up there. I mean, if he could become the Jimmy-type player that is consistent scorer, I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, if he could be taunting Al Horford and doing all those other things that Jimmy did, then sure. I don't know. I have a hard time seeing a small forward in today's game unless, again, transcendent. Having that kind of impact. There's nothing against Jaquez specifically. It's just I don't. Is he going to be a 25-point scorer that does all the things that Jimmy did? They're going to raise his game in that level in the playoffs. Again, I'll lean towards the guard. But it's an interesting debate. And again, this is a change in direction for this franchise. And we'll see if it continues. I still am always waiting for the shoe to drop and for Pat to move three of these guys. But so far, it hasn't happened. And I still think we're headed possibly to a Jovic extension, which at least would keep him with them for the time being. I want to thank our sponsors, 305-800-PAIN. Also, our friends over at PrizePicks. Use the code FIVE.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.